This is our famous hedge maze. It's quite an attraction around here. The walls are 13 feet high, and the hedge is about as old as the hotel itself. It's a lot of fun.
Hey, hello, and welcome to my channel. As you can see from the title today, we're talking about The Shining, and in particular, we're going to look at one strange detail I noticed about the famous hedge maze of this film. And that detail is that this maze actually disappears in some shots. Now, hear me out. I know that sounds bizarre, but after we discuss this and look closely at some of the shots in this film, I think we might be able to answer the question, does this maze actually disappear in some shots? And if so, why? Now, the opening of this film is kind of well known for the long overhead sweeping shots and that yellow beetle car driving up to the overlook. Of course, Jack is going to his interview with Mr. Ullman. And then we see it. The large compound of the Overlook Hotel comes into view. But wait a minute. Something's missing. Isn't there supposed to be a large maze, like right next to the hotel? I mean, here's the maze shot from above. It's right next door to the Overlook, or at least we thought it was. But even from different angles, we don't see it. Is this the disappearing maze? Well, let's move on in the film. Since obviously we know there's a maze in this film, let's try and find the first time we actually see the maze, and maybe we can figure out where it is. Now, after Jack's interview, the family drive up to the Overlook Hotel to spend the winter as the caretakers, and we get this front shot of the Overlook with a beautiful cloud-topped mountain behind it, but we still can't see a maze. Next, we actually get our first look at the hedge maze as Mr. Ullman takes the family on a little tour around the Overlook. And you can see here, it's apparently right next to the Overlook Hotel. Seems like a very short walk from the maze entrance to go into the Overlook. And yet, we can't see the maze in these shots. So something funny is going on here. And yes, I am well aware that Stanley had the exteriors filmed in the US, whilst the actual maze scenes are filmed in the UK. But as he is a perfectionist, a glaring omission of an important object makes no sense. Some sort of maze could have been erected in the US for the outdoor shots, but it wasn't. And I think that was deliberate. We seem to have a case of the disappearing and reappearing hedge maze, and I have an idea as to why. But first, let's take a look at the maze's other appearances in the film, since, yes, it's so important, it's almost like another character in The Shining. Here we see our first interaction with the maze, as Danny and Wendy want to spend an afternoon exploring that imposing maze that is supposedly right next to the hotel. As they walk around inside, we get that eerie music playing. It's definitely not making us think of a carefree afternoon spent having fun. At one point, it even seems like they are lost. Then we see Jack, again with ominous music, glaring down at a 3D model of the maze. And then, of course, we see the overhead shot of our maze, with Danny and Wendy looking very small in the middle of it. This maze is so massive, I've said before, it makes Danny and Wendy look vulnerable by comparison. Oh, and side note, you see this map of the maze that's in this little wooden stand right in front of the entrance? We see it as Danny and Wendy are going into the maze. Yeah, well, in this shot with Mr. Ullman taking the Torrances in front of the maze entrance, that map isn't in front anymore. It's moved. See it off to the side there, near the edge of the maze? It's no longer in front. So again, we have things moving in between takes. As you probably know, The Shining is kind of famous for furniture and other objects moving in between shots, and it's said to add to the underlying creepy atmosphere of the film. Speaking of creepy atmosphere, I just realized that the green bathroom being, well, green might be a subtle link to the maze because, yes, both are green, and maybe I'm reaching here, but these are two of the biggest set pieces in the movie, and they are both green and operating under unusual rules, which we'll talk more about later. Now, the next time we see the maze, it's after Jack has lost his mind and goes after his family with an axe. Danny ends up running into the maze, which is now all covered in snow and looks completely white, at least on the outside. With Jack chasing him, literally with an axe, trying to kill him, it's a terrifying scene, as it's not just cold, it's also dark now and hard to see. But Danny manages to escape the maze as he carefully retraces his footsteps. This whole scene actually has hints of Hansel and Gretel in it. And then he fools Jack, who went into this maze with murderous intent and never left it, as he ends up frozen into the hedge maze. Now, remember I mentioned the unusual rules that certain sets may be operating under? The green bathroom is one, and that's the subject of another video one day. But the maze definitely is operating under unusual rules too. In fact, I'm going to call this fairy tale rules. And what are fairy tale rules? Well, it means that normal laws of time or space seem to bend in certain places. I mentioned in a video about the elevators of The Shining that the elevator may be the center of an energy vortex. In a similar vein, when you enter the maze, the normal rules of the outside world don't necessarily hold. The first proof of that is the fact that the maze disappears and then reappears in outside shots. And I'm calling that as definitely not an accident, since the sign in front also moves. It marks the maze out as an unusual place where anything might be possible. So, to start our sum up, does the hedge maze in The Shining actually disappear and reappear in certain shots? Well, I'm going to say definitely yes. It is obviously next door to the overlook in these shots of Mr. Ullman giving the family a tour. You can see the hotel and maze in the same shots, fairly close to one another. Yet, in any overhead or outside shot we get, there is no large hedge maze on any side. It isn't there. Now, I know someone will say the outside shots were done separately in the US, and you're right, but Stanley Kubrick was too careful for such an obvious omission. Look here at these purpose built set facades of the Overlook Hotel, all done in England, and the Colorado Lounge was also built in the UK. These are massive sets, but Stanley had them built, so he could have had the maze built in the USA too, for the outside shots at least. I think the maze is disappearing and reappearing in certain shots because it's an object that operates by fairy tale rules. Strange things happen here to all ye who enter. The Shining is also well known for furniture and objects that move in between shots, like the ashtrays and chairs in the game room that move in between shots when the twins are present, which shows that these are ghostly twins. And the maze is another object, albeit a very large one, that is moving between some shots. I'll go you one better and even say that some things are changing and morphing while Danny and Wendy are inside the maze. But that's the subject of another video. The crew apparently backed up this assertion, since they were often confused the next morning to find Stanley had changed things around in the maze without them knowing. So, although a maze is already an unusual and puzzling place by design, this maze in The Shining may even be a magical place, operating under fairy tale rules, where strange things happen, such as the sign out front completely moving from one place to another, to the strange bending of space that must occur for an entire large maze to be present one moment and then just disappear the next.